Fantastic. Awesome. So I'm going to start from the learning management system. I'm going to be walking you through Akindi through Canvas today, but Akindi also integrates with Blackboard, Moodle, and D2L, and all of them work pretty much the same. It's just a matter of getting into it that's a little bit different. So, and as Hannah mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be answering them along the way. So to get started with Akindi, you're going to log into your learning management system. You will select a course. And the very first time you use Akindi, you'll actually have to enable it on your course shell. So in Canvas, this is done by going to Settings, clicking the Navigation tab, and then enabling Akindi onto your course. This is slightly different through Blackboard, D2L, and Moodle. So Hannah's going to drop in the specific links for each learning management system so that you can get started and understand how to access Akindi in your learning management system. Once Akindi has been enabled on your course, there will be a Launch Akindi link that will allow you to launch Akindi directly from your course shell. There's a few things that happen when you launch Akindi. The first is that we automatically create your account, so you don't have to have a separate login and password for Akindi. Everything sort of just happens in the background with your learning management system. We also import your class roster for you. So you'll notice that my Intro to Accounting course is now listed here, and Akindi has automatically synced my student IDs, names, emails, and sections. I'm now ready to create my first assessment. On this first page of the assessment process, we are going to be customizing the assessment that you'll be giving the students. So I have my Intro to Accounting course selected here. I can then input the assessment name, midterm, quiz, whatever will help me identify it when I'm looking at it in the future. And then today I will be running an online assessment. Zoom in. You'll then select the delivery method for this assessment. So deliver via LMS. So that means that the students will access their assessment link through the Launch Akindi link in your course shell. So the same Launch Akindi link that you click to access your Akindi account, the students will access their online assessment through that link. Alternatively, you can deliver the assessment through email, which will send each student a secure link to access their assessment. Next, you'll customize the test question display. So display full PDF. We'll zoom in a little bit further. So what that will be is that you'll provide Akindi with a link to your, or you'll provide Akindi with a PDF of your test questions, and the student will be able to see that unedited PDF and select the correct responses for each question on the bubbles on the right-hand side. We also have one question at a time display, which will provide the students with one question at a time. And you also have the ability to disable backtracking with one question at a time, meaning once they move forward to the next question, they can't go back to previously answered questions. Finally, we have no questions at all. So as you can see, it's just essentially like a blank bubble sheet. This comes in handy if you want to have an in-class lecture and you'll be displaying the slides or the questions on a slide, for example. Today, I'll be showing you one question at a time assessment. I'm going to turn on backtracking. And I'm actually going to turn on multiple versions and enable automated scrambling. So what this means is that Akindi will automatically scramble the test questions for each student so that they receive them in a randomized order. Before I continue on, I just am going to take a moment and answer any questions that may have come in.
Yes, so we do have some questions. So we have a question: is it possible to create an assignment in Canvas that takes you to the Akindi assignment and then uses the grade past that?
So unfortunately, so when you're running an assessment in Akindi, the students will actually be writing that Akindi assessment. It isn't possible to create an assessment in Akindi that will then be accessed through Canvas. Does that clarify the question? Hannah, I'm not sure if you'd be able to have a more detailed response to that.
Oh, yes, it does clarify the question.
Okay, perfect.
We have another question. Does one question at a time presentation use the PDF document, or is it dependent on specifically Word format?
So the one question at a time format will ask you to upload your Word document, and I'll show you that in the next step. And essentially we'll read that Word document, process it, and import their test questions into Akindi.
Great. We have another question. What is the difference between automated scrambling and multiple versions?
So the difference between automated scrambling and versions is actually the test question display. So for automated scrambling, that is going to be a one question at a time display. For versions, that will be for a full PDF display. So essentially, you'll handle the different versions on your end outside of Akindi, and you'll upload a PDF for each version, and Akindi will randomly assign a version to each student.
Thank you.
Great. I'll continue on. Keep leaving those questions in the chat.
Oh, sorry, we have one more, Krista.
Yeah.
We have a question. How would the PDF need to be formatted, or the Word document need to be formatted for a one question at a time presentation?
Perfect segue to the next step. So I'll show you the test question Word document. So as you can see, here is the Word document that I'll be uploading to Akindi. So there's essentially no special formatting required. We've really tried to design this so that you can use your existing test question document and upload that directly into Akindi. So you can see I have my questions numbered, my answers lettered, and I've actually indicated the correct answer key in this Word document using boldface, italics, or a different colored font. It doesn't have to be red, it can be any colored font. That's different. And Akindi will be able to read this document and identify the questions and answers. So when I am back into Akindi, it's now asking me for that Word document. I can upload this Word document. Akindi will automatically read those test questions, answers, and the answer key. And I can click continue and review that automatic identification. So what you're looking at here is our newest feature in Akindi called Akindi Author. So this actually isn't even released yet, and everyone that's attending today's webinar will have early access to this feature. So this Akindi Author works exactly like a Word document. So you can type and edit it just like you would with a Word document. And I'll show you what that means. So we can see that Akindi has identified 7 questions. It's identified 7 marks, meaning it's identified the answer key that I've inputted onto my Word document. And then it's identified 2 issues. So you can see that the title here and the date, Akindi wasn't able to identify those as questions or an answer. So I can click on this little menu icon and delete this block. Alternatively, I can type as if it was a Word document and simply delete it using my keyboard and delete that block altogether. Again, because this functions exactly like a Word document, I can click enter and it will allow me to add in another response. I can click enter twice and it will automatically create a new question with new answers and another new answer. This will also allow you to copy and paste new questions. So I have a new question added here. I can copy this, paste it into Akindi Author, and Akindi will automatically import it. for these new questions, I can simply select the correct response for them. Lastly, on this page, I can continue on. I can verify that Akindi did in fact successfully identify all my questions, answers, and answer keys, and I can use our advanced marking options. So Akindi allows you to control the weight and the grading scheme using advanced marking options. So I can click on this menu icon and access that. So I can quickly make this question worth multiple marks, or I can make it worth partial marks or even 0 marks. I want to have a survey question. Using this drop-down menu, I can control the grading scheme. Exact mark is our default grading scheme. That means the student would have to select all 3 correct responses in this case in order to receive a mark. We could also use partial mark, which means that the student would would receive a partial mark for each correct response up to the full weight of the question. And Akindi will automatically divide this amongst however many correct responses there are. And then finally, we have either or, which means the student will receive full marks for any of those correct responses. Oh, I duplicated it. There we go. I'll take any questions now about Akindi Author, our newest feature.
Thanks, Krista. So we have a few people eager to know if the one question at a time can support images, tables, diagrams, that kind of thing, or if it needs to be kind of kept to text only at the moment.
So at the moment, it's only text. That being said, we will be releasing the ability to have images within your document that Akindi will then process in the coming weeks. So we'll be sure to keep you updated when that's released.
I have another question here. Does it only support multiple choice questions?
At the moment, yes, Akindi only supports multiple choice questions.
That's everything for now.
Great. All my test questions have been entered. I can then click.
Sorry.
Save. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sorry, Krista. Somebody has just asked if you'd be able to show how to import the test questions again. Just that part.
Absolutely. So let me go back here. So essentially what will happen is that on this test document, I'll be able, or on this like import form, I guess, I can select the correct response or select the test question document. So just the same way that I would like attach an attachment to an email, for example, I can upload that here. Akindi will process that document and then allow me to review it. And again, I can either just like delete this block altogether or be able to type and delete it. Oh, how did I get to the import page? I'm seeing that question now. So I'm happy, James, is it okay if we jump back to that a little bit at the end? So essentially you'll select the one question at a time display when creating your assessment, and it will take you next to that step. And I can dive into that after, James. Great. So once I've imported my test questions, I will then be asked to set the schedule for my assessment. So I will be asked to enter a time limit. I can set however long I would like. Or if I want, I can also disable the time limit altogether, meaning the students can essentially take as long as they like. I'll then set the activation window. So the activation time and the deadline. So the activation window is like essentially the start date. After this time passes, then Akindi will allow students to access their assessment. And the deadline is like a hard cutoff when they have to access, when they're going to be done with their assessment. So I can set today at 2 o'clock and say that they have 48 hours to complete it. And I'll be able to continue. Before I continue, is there any questions?
Yes, so we do have a question regarding the grading scheme. So I have partial grading in my exams, but with only a single correct answer. Students can get partial credit by choosing more than one answer if they choose a correct answer. Does Akindi support this kind of partial credit?
At the moment, Akindi doesn't support that partial credit where there's only one correct response. Partial mark for an Akindi's grading scheme means that there would have to be sort of multiple correct responses, and they would receive a partial mark for each. We're happy to take a note of that, though. We're always adding new features and building new things. So we'll make a note of that. Hannah, do you mind just jotting that down while we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Awesome.
I do have another question related to the time. I think we'll be covering this in a moment, though.
Oh, great. Okay. So once we've set the general schedule, this means the schedule that'll be applied to most students. We can click Save and Continue, and we'll be brought to the status dashboard. This status dashboard allows you to set accommodations for specific students as well as monitor your assessment. So if I do have students that require accommodation, whether that is writing the assessment on a different day, whether that is having extra time to complete an assessment, I can select the desired students on my status dashboard, click the Actions menu, and select Edit Assessment Timing. I can then customize the assessment for these particular students. So for example, I want to give them 3 hours instead of 2, and I'm going to extend the deadline so that they have an extra day to complete it. Once I click Save and Continue, Akindi will update those specific students' time limits. As you can see, those 2 students I selected, they now have 3 hours instead of 2, and their deadline has been extended. Also from this page, you'll be able to preview the assessment. So before you deliver the assessment to the students and make it available, you can have a quick double check to just make sure your test questions look as they expected. You can click Preview Assessment and view your test questions. You can verify that everything looks as expected. You could play around, sort of see how the student would feel completing it, and verify that everything looks correct. Next, now that everything is set up, you're ready to deliver the assessment to the student. So I am running an LMS delivery assessment here. So it says publish to Canvas. This would say whatever assessment you have or whatever your learning management system is. I'll click Publish to Canvas, and I have the ability to notify the students by email that there is now an assessment available to them. So when I'm publishing the assessment, it'll be visible to the students right away, meaning they'll be able to see that there's an upcoming assessment, but they won't actually be able to start the assessment until after the activation date. So I'll publish this to students. I can now see that the assessment status is published. And if I was doing an email delivery option, this would say email assessment to students, and I'll have the ability to customize the email that's then being sent to students that they can then access their assessment through. Now that's published, I'll be able to monitor the assessment as it's completed. I can track the number of questions that they complete in real time, see how long they've spent on the assessment, and again, sort of see the time limit and their assessment window. Before I jump into how the students access their assessment, are there any questions around the status dashboard or setting student accommodations?
It doesn't look like we have any questions around that at the moment.
Great. So I'll jump into the student side of Akindi.
Oh, we do have one. Sorry, Krista.
Yeah, absolutely.
So somebody's asked, can you change accommodations after a missed test?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can edit the assessment timing at any point. So if a student, and through the same process. So you can select the student, click the actions, and edit their assessment timing. So this would allow you, even if a student has a technical difficulties and you want to give them a little bit extra time on their assessment, you can edit it at any point. So from the student's point of view, if you were delivering the assessment via email, they would receive an email that looks like this, explaining to them sort of their start date, when they can access this assessment, and they'll be taken to their unique test URL. For the learning management systems, they'll log in to Akindi, or they'll log into their learning management system rather, select the course that they'll be writing, and click the same Launch Akindi link that you click. So in Canvas, it's on that left-hand panel. In D2L, and Moodle's also on that left-hand panel. In D2L, it's under Content, and same with Blackboard. It's also under Content. So they'll click that Launch Akindi link, and they'll be able to see their upcoming assessments. So these are anything that's been published but isn't yet active for them to start, and see any of their active assessments. So here's the midterm one that I just created, and I can click start that assessment as the student. Let me refresh. One second, let me just pause my screen and make sure that everything is working as expected. Thanks for your patience here, team.
If there's any other questions that we can pick up in the meantime, just as we're working through this, do please post them in the chat.
There we go. So now we can actually click Start Assessment. The student will be presented with instructions on how to use Akindi. Once they click I agree, then their assessment timer will begin, and they'll be able to start their assessment. Again, because I chose to randomize the test questions, each student will receive their tests in a randomized order. They can use the next question to continue on, or the question index to jump to specific questions. And if I did disable backtracking, then this previous question button, as well as the question index, wouldn't be available, meaning they would just be forced to continue on. Great. Are there any questions around the student side of Akindi?
We do have quite a few questions. So the first is, if a student loses connection to the internet, what happens if they're taking in the middle of, if they are in the middle of taking the test?
So Akindi is actually saving their responses in the background the entire time during the assessment. So if they lose internet connection or their browser crashes, then they can actually restart the assessment, or they can reopen the assessment, I should say, and all of their saved responses will be there, so they won't lose any of their work. That being said, if for whatever reason the timer doesn't stop while they're not on that assessment. So if they lose connection for 20 minutes, the timer will be 20 minutes less when they come back.
Great, thank you. We have another question which you might need to submit, so you might want to come back to it, but a really good question. Can you review how to reopen a submitted attempt? So for example, a student experiences an internet service interruption partway through a test. The test is submitted before connectivity could be restored, so we'd need to reopen the attempt for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially what would happen, so from the status dashboard, I'll just do a little update so you can see. So I now have the student, they've completed 3 questions, spent 2 minutes writing this assessment so far. So once the student has submitted their assessment, then you can select them, and there will be an option that says reopen assessment attempt. So this will allow you to essentially set a new schedule for that attempt. And you'll have the option to either clear all of their saved responses, or you can essentially leave those saved responses so that when they restart, all of their saved responses will show up there.
I have one more question just regarding timing side of things. So can the timer be extended but not reset for all students or selected students while the test is in progress?
Yeah. So again, going through the same process in which you can select the desired students, click actions and edit assessment timing, and then change that student's assessment. And Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that when that happens, though, the student would have to refresh in order for their timer to be updated. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Mhm.
Right. So yes, once you extend it, then you'll have to actually communicate with the student that they should refresh. But again, Akindi will save all of their responses. They'll be able to start from where they left off, and their timer will update with the extended time. Great. Are there any other questions?
I think we just had one. Two more. So somebody's asked what happens when the timer runs out for the student.
Great. So when the timer runs out, then Akindi will automatically submit and close that student's assessment. So they don't have the ability to submit late. Essentially, when the timer runs out, we'll take all of those saved responses that we have and submit them on behalf of the student.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Just a general question around proctoring or lockdown browsers, if there's an integration or something that can be used alongside Akindi.
So at the moment, Akindi isn't compatible with any lockdown browsers or proctoring solutions. We have in the back end of Akindi, we are able to essentially like see a screen recording of the student's Akindi assessment. So we aren't able to see other browsers or other windows. We can see their activity within Akindi. So if there's anything that you'd like us to investigate, we would be happy. You're welcome to contact us and we can work with you to investigate a specific student. Great. Fantastic. So I'll continue on. If any other questions come up, feel free to let me know. So as I showed on this status dashboard, Akindi will be able to process, or I'll be able to see sort of an update as students complete the assessment. So we can see that I have opened it, and I can refresh to actually get more accurate information. It's now been 5 minutes lapsed. This will update as the students are writing the assessment. Once the student submitted, their status would be set to submitted, and I can actually view the results. As soon as they start to come in, they'll be populated in the results in Akindi. I'll now show you what that looks like. So Akindi's results analysis are set to help you understand how well the student performed, as well as how well the test was designed. So on the overview tab of Akindi, we can see some of the easiest questions on the test, and we can see a breakdown between the different distractors or the different responses. We can see an average, highest mark, lowest mark, as well as some of the most difficult questions. So again, we can see that breakdown between those different questions, or those different responses. We also display the discriminatory score for the questions. So here we can see the discriminatory score measures the correlation between how well a student performed on the test and whether they answered this specific question correctly. So for question 8, for example, we can see that the highest performing students tended to answer this question correctly, while the lowest performing students did not. Comparing that to question 4, which we want to, or question 2 even better, we can see that there doesn't seem to be any correlation between how well the student performed on the test and whether they answered the question correctly. Both the highest performing students and the lowest performing students answered this question correctly in about the same rate. Continuing to the graphs tab is a full breakdown of all of the questions and their item analysis. So we can see the students' marks, the grade distribution. We have the answer breakdown, so the number of students that answered it correctly and the number of students that answered it incorrectly. And by selecting any one of these bars, we can see the breakdown in the question. And then finally, we have the point by zero for that question. The responses tab is the full spreadsheet view of all of the students and how they performed on the test. So we can see all of the students, their grade, mark, the submission time, and what they selected for each question. There's a number of features on this page that come in handy sort of post-assessment. One is that you can actually edit the answer key directly from this page. So this top row is the answer key, and I can actually edit it here. So I can double click on the desired answer key and make any changes. So for question 2, I want to give every student full credit. So I can select all of the responses, use our either or grading scheme, which means all of them are worth full marks. And as soon as I click OK, Akindi will automatically update the answer key, adjust everyone's marks and grades, and I can save those changes. We also have a report column here, which will allow you to view each student's individual report. So this comes in handy during office hours. If a student comes and wants to review their test with you, you can pull up their grade and see their responses for each question. Now that we've reviewed all of the exam data, we can then export that. So because Akindi is integrated directly into your learning management system, you can send the grades directly to your gradebook. So you can either create a new item directly from Akindi, or you can choose to set up an existing or use an existing grade column that's already set up. So I already have my midterm 1 set up in my gradebook. I can select that. I can scale the marks. So there was only 10 questions, but say I wanted to have be sent out of 100, I can edit that and click export. And just like that, the grades were sent. We also have a number of export options under the actions menu. So we can download a CSV file. This provides a full spreadsheet view, essentially the responses tab in a CSV format. We can download a question breakdown CSV file, which provides a full item analysis for every question. You can email students their grades. This provides each student with their report in a secure email. And then finally, so the downloaded corrected test sheets, this is actually a pure paper assessment feature right now, as there aren't sheets to correct for online assessments. I'll pause here. Are there any questions around reviewing the analytics or exporting the data?
We haven't got any questions come through around that just yet. I'm just seeing if anybody's typing.
Fantastic. So you're also welcome to add, if there's anything that is part of your existing workflow that you're unsure how to translate to Akindi, feel free to drop those in there. We're happy to answer them. As people may be typing questions, I do want to highlight our support. So at Akindi, we want you to feel supported at every step of the way. So at any point, if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us through our live in-app chat. So we do our best to respond within 30 minutes during Eastern office hours. We also have an extensive help center, which you can access. Let me show you what that would look like. So you're able to reach us directly, or you can search our extensive help center that has a number of video tutorials, walkthrough guides, frequently asked questions, and that you're welcome to take advantage of it. Are there any questions, Nina, that I can help with?
Yeah, we do have a few that have just come in. So somebody's asked if it's possible to see the actual test content alongside the results simultaneously.
That's a great question. So at the moment, that isn't something that we currently offer, and we get how valuable that is. And that's something that we do want to add in the future, but isn't currently available.
Thank you. Somebody's also asked, this is probably more relevant for potentially hybrid assessments, but If they complete the exam in person, will the submission time be available to review next to the student?
Mhm. So if they're writing it in person and you're uploaded, so all of these online assessments, I guess I should say, also act as hybrid assessments. So you could essentially upload a paper assessment to this to an online assessment as well. So the submission time would reflect the time that it was uploaded to Akindi, that paper assessment.
Great, thank you. I think that's everything for now.
Mhm. I see a few more people. So yeah, unfortunately, Akindi doesn't offer any lockdown or proctoring capabilities at this time. Um, Any other questions? Feel free to keep adding them if anything comes up.
Oh, so another question. Can you see the question order for a test?
Like what question the students wrote it in, I'm assuming?
I think so, yes. So I suppose if the questions were scrambled, can you see which order it appeared for each individual student?
I don't think there's anywhere that we display that. Hannah, do you know if there's anywhere?
Not at the moment. It is something that we are kind of have on our roadmap to look into, and also to consider putting that information potentially on the student report as well.
So yeah, these reports would actually display them in the answer key order. So essentially the order that you uploaded them in. So I'm recognizing that we would have access to, like, in somewhere in our, for sure in our screen recordings, Hannah, we would be able to review and see. I'm recognizing that we can find out for you if you want to know which order the students wrote it in, but that isn't readily available in Akindi at the moment.
We have a couple more questions. So have you heard of anyone using any solutions to minimize the chance of students accessing other browsers, Zoom, for instance?
Yeah, so we have heard of cases in which instructors use Zoom as essentially like a proctoring solution, in which students are asked to be on a Zoom call while they're writing their assessment. This obviously isn't perfect, as they would still potentially be able to access other browser tabs on their computer, but we do have instructors that have done this for sure in the past.
Great, thank you. I have one more here. It's a great question. What is the advantage of offering an exam through Akindi Online instead of just putting the exam in Canvas?
The biggest advantage of using Akindi over Canvas or any learning management system is the ability to quickly import test questions and set up assessments. We've heard some nightmare stories of spending hours having to copy and paste individual test questions into the learning management system, or even like retyping or trying to fiddle with really odd file formats in a really particular way in order to get them read by the learning management system. So with Akindi, you can essentially import your test questions in a matter of seconds using your existing test question Word document. So just like the ease of setup and importing test questions is really what makes Akindi stand apart from all the learning management systems.
Great. Oh, I'll just share this. I hope someone doesn't mind. Somebody said, I paid my son $20 to import questions one at a time. Yeah, it feels like we have a lot of horror stories coming up in the chat.
Yeah. It's a good deal.
I think, yeah. I think that's all the questions we have this time.
That's amazing. Great. Well, thank you so much for attending. As you leave, we'll be presented with a quick feedback form. If you have any ideas for future features or things that you'd love to see from us, both from like a training and support, but also from a future improvements and features, please fill that out. We are always building and always looking to improve. So thank you so much for attending. This was really great.
Thank you, everybody. We're sticking around for a moment, as Chris mentioned. If you do have any questions and you know how to use the chat, and yes, please do fill out that survey.
Awesome.